Acid dreams. I'm probably going to skip the prologue and just go straight to the beginning. So this is chapter 1. In the beginning, there was madness. The truth seekers. In the spring of 1942, General William Wild Bill Donovan, Chief of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the CIA's wartime predecessor, assembled a half-dozen prestigious American scientists and asked them to undertake a top-secret research program. Their mission, Donovan explained, was to develop a speech-inducing drug for use in intelligence interrogations. He insisted that the need for such a weapon was so acute as to warrant any and every attempt to find it. The use of drugs by secret agents had long been a part of cloak and dagger folklore. But this would be the first concerted attempt on the part of an American espionage organization to modify human behavior through chemical means. We were not afraid to try things that had never been done before, asserted Donovan, who was known for his freewheeling and unconventional approach to the spy trade. The OSS chief pressed his associates to come up with a substance that could break down the psychological defenses of enemy spies and POWs, thereby causing an uninhibited disclosure of classified information. Such a drug would also be useful for screening OSS personnel in order to identify German sympathizers, double agents, and potential misfits. Dr. Winfried Overholser, superintendent of St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., was appointed chairman of the research committee. Other members included Dr. Edward Strecker, then president of the American Psychiatric Association, and Harry J. Anslinger, head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. The committee surveyed and rejected numerous drugs, including alcohol, barbiturates, and caffeine. Peyote and scopolamine were also tested. Scopolamine. Scopolamine. Scopolamine were also tested. But the visions produced by these substances interfered with the interrogation process. Eventually, marijuana was chosen as the most likely candidate for a speech-inducing agent. OSS scientists created a highly potent extract of cannabis and was obtained, and through a process known as esterification, a clear and viscous liquid was obtained. The final product had no color, odor, or taste. It would be nearly impossible to detect when administered surreptitiously, which is exactly what the spies intended to do. There is no reason to believe that any other nation or group is familiar with the preparation of this particular drug, stated a once classified OSS document. Henceforth, the OSS referred to the marijuana extract as TD, a rather transparent cover for truth drug. Various ways of administering TD were tried on witting and unwitting suspects. OSS operatives found that the medicated goo could be injected into any type of food, such as mashed potatoes, butter, salad dressing, or in such things as candy. Another scheme relied on useful facial tissues impregnated with the drug. But these methods had their drawbacks. What if someone had a particularly ravenous appetite? Too much TD could knock a subject out and render him useless for interrogation. The OSS eventually determined that the best approach involved the use of a hypodermic syringe to inject a diluted TD solution into a cigarette or cigar. After smoking such an item, the subject would get suitably stoned, at which point a skillful interrogator would move in and try to get him to spill the beans. The effects of TD were described in an OSS report. TD appears to relax all inhibitions and to deaden the areas of the brain which govern the individual's discretion and caution. It accentuates the senses and makes manifest any strong characteristics of the individual. Sexual inhibitions are lowered, and the sense of humor is accentuated to the point where any statement or situation can become extremely funny to the subject. On the other hand, a person's unpleasant characteristics may also be heightened. It may be stated that, generally speaking, the reaction will be one of great loquacity and hilarity. After testing TD on themselves, their associates, and U.S. military personnel, OSS agents utilized the drug operationally, although on a limited basis. The results were mixed. In certain instances, TD, truth drug, subjects felt a driving necessity to discuss psychologically charged topics. Whatever the individual is trying to withhold will be forced to the top of his subconscious mind. But there were also those who experienced toxic reactions, better known in latter day lingo as bummers. One unwitting doper became irritable and threatening and complained of feeling like he was two different people. The peculiar nature of his symptoms precluded any attempt to question him. That was how it went from one extreme to the other. At times, TD seemed to stimulate a rush of talk. On other occasions, people got paranoid and didn't say a word. The lack of consistency proved to be a major stumbling block, and Donovan's dreamers, as his enthusiastic OSS staffers have been called, reluctantly weaned themselves from their reefer madness. A handwritten comment in the margins of an OSS document summed up their stoned escapades. The drug defies all but the most expert and searching analysis, and for all practical purposes, can be considered beyond analysis. After the war, the CIA and the military picked up where the OSS had left off in the secret search for a truth serum. The Navy took the lead when it initiated Project Chatter in 1947, the same year the CIA was formed. Described as an offensive program, Chatter was supposed to devise means of obtaining information from people independent of their volition, but without physical duress. Toward this end, Dr. Charles Savage conducted experiments with mescaline, a semi-synthetic extract of the peyote cactus that produces hallucinations similar to those caused by LSD, at the Naval Medical Research Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. But these studies, which involved animal as well as human subjects, did not yield an effective truth serum. And Chatter was terminated in 1953. The Navy became interested in mescaline as an interrogation agent when American investigators learned of mind control experiments carried out by Nazi doctors at the Dachau concentration camps during World War II. After administering the hallucinogen to 30 prisoners, the Nazis concluded that it was impossible to impose one's will on another person, as in hypnosis, even when the strongest dose of mescaline had been given. But the drug still afforded certain advantages to SS interrogators, who were consistently able to draw even the most intimate secrets from the subject when questioned. Were cleverly put. Not surprisingly, sentiments of hatred and revenge were exposed in every case. The mescaline experiments at Dachau were described. Why do you keep interrupting me? Were described in a lengthy report by the U.S. Naval Technical Mission, which swept across Europe in search of every scrap of industrial material and scientific data that could be garnered from the fallen reach. This mission set the stage for the wholesale importation of more than 600 top Nazi scientists under the auspices of Project Paperclip, which the CIA supervised during the early years of the Cold War. Among those who emigrated to the US in such a fashion was Dr. Hubertus Strughold, the German scientist whose chief subordinates, Dr. Sigmund Ruff and Dr. Sigmund Rascher, were directly involved in aviation medicine experiments at the SHU, which included the medical atrocities during the war. Struckhold settled in Texas and became an important figure in America's space program. After Wernher von Braun, he was the top Nazi scientist employed by the American government, and he was subsequently hailed by NASA as the father of space medicine. The CIA, meanwhile, had launched an intensive research effort geared toward developing special interrogation techniques. Two methods showed promise in the late 1940s. The first involved narcohypnosis, in which a CIA psychiatrist attempted to induce a trance state after administering a mild sedative. A second technique involved the combination of two different drugs with contradictory effects. A heavy dose of barbiturates was given to knock the subject out, and then he received an injection of a stimulant, usually some type of amphetamine. As he started to come out of a somnambulant state, he would reach a certain ineffable point prior to becoming fully conscious, described in CIA documents as the twilight zone. This groggy condition was considered optimal for interrogation. CIA doctors attempted to extend the stuporous limbo as long as possible in order to maintain the delicate balance between consciousness and unconsciousness. An intravenous hookup was inserted in both the subject's arms. One set of works contained a downer, the other an upper, the classic goofball effect. With a mere flick of the finger, an interrogator could regulate the flow of chemicals. The idea was to produce a push, a sudden outpouring of thoughts, emotions, confidences, and whatnot. Along this line, various combinations were tested. Seconal and dexedrine, pentothal and desoxin, and depending on the whim of the spy in charge, some marijuana, the old OSS standby, which the CIA referred to as sugar, might be thrown in for good measure. The goofball approach was not a precision science. There were no strictly prescribed rules or operating procedures regarding what drugs should be employed in a given situation. The CIA interrogators were left to their own devices, and a certain degree of recklessness was perhaps inevitable. In one case, a group of CIA experts hastily drafted a memo after reviewing a report prepared by one of the agency's special interrogation teams. The medical consultants pointed out that the amounts of scopolamine scopolamine administered were extremely heavy. They also noted that the best results were obtained when two or at most three different chemicals were used in a session. In this case, however, heavy dosages of scopolamine were administered along with thiamine, sodium luminol, atropine sulfate, sodium pentothal, and caffeine sulfate. One of the CIA's professional consultants in H techniques also questioned why hypnosis was attempted after a long and continuous use of chemicals, after the subject had vomited, and after apparently a maximum tolerance point had been reached with the chemicals. Everyone who read the interrogation report agreed the hypnosis was useless, if not impossible, under such conditions. I'm going to pause for now.